Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I hope you all can hear me. Thank you all for joining. This is super exciting. Let's get started. Welcome to the WorkOS winter release. We do these events roughly once a quarter to talk to users about all the stuff we've been building, showcase some stuff coming up, just generally get to meet the team. There's a bunch of people from WorkOS right now in the chat. So if you have any questions during the event as we're going through stuff, please feel free to drop in there and we'll hope to answer them either now or we can catch up with you later. But thank you for joining. So before jumping into WorkOS, the new features, I wanted to start with a story to set the context for WorkOS and to rewind a little bit. So this is a tale of SaaS. So imagine that you are a founder and you're building a new workplace app. Say you're building something like Slack. And you launch this app, you probably launch it through something like Product Hunt, through Twitter, and your users love it. You get a lot of adoption. It spreads through word of mouth, spreads perhaps virally across the market. Some people start paying for it. Some individuals start using it. Then some small teams start using it, and it continues to grow and grow. And you're eager to grow revenue. So naturally, what you start doing is you approach the bigger users at companies, and that's how you start trying to sell it, those bigger deals. If you've heard this story before, it's really because this is the story of all modern SaaS companies, all modern software companies. So this is what Dropbox has done. This is what Slack did, Asana, many, many different companies that are out there. But a problem happens. So you'll have this big potential customer that you'll be talking to, and they'll already be using your app probably because somebody started adopting it at that company. And they'll say, hey, your app's great. We're ready to buy it. But here's our standard vendor app requirements. Here's our features that we actually need to deploy this across 1,000 people, across 2,000 people, sometimes even across like 100 people. And for most founders, most companies that have focused on a bottoms-up motion, this is a pretty big surprise, pretty abrupt wake-up call for them. And it's very confusing. These features that they're asking for are not things that you had built. And I call this the Enterprise Chasm, the separation between the bottom-up self-serve early adopters and those larger enterprise customers that you might be trying to go after. Previously, your end user in the situation was the buyer. That individual signing up for Slack was going to put in their credit card, signing up for Dropbox was going to put in their credit card. Not anymore. Now there's a different group. And that group is enterprise IT in this kind of office of the CIO, the chief information officer. And they're now a gatekeeper for your business. And they have a completely different set of requirements. They probably don't really care about your actual shiny features. They care about, these other things that integrate with their systems. And these other things, these other enterprise features turn out to be really boring to build for engineers. They're very complex to build. You usually have to interface with legacy protocols, old IT systems. There's buggy edge cases you have to deal with, a lot of different integrations. And this effectively just becomes a really big maintenance burden for your company. Unfortunately, the features don't save you, the shiny features you've built. Enterprise IT doesn't really care about your super unique file sync algorithm. They care about whether users can log in through something like SAML. And so they really do end up being a gatekeeper here, and your app ends up getting stuck. And this is really frustrating because the enterprise chasm is actually what can kill products and can kill startups. For a lot of companies, kind of thinking about this at a meta level, your revenue is primarily from self-serve. Sometimes you have like an overgrown organization, some bigger orgs, but a lot of companies get stuck in this single-digit millions of ARR. You'll be in like that 2 to 3 million ARR for like several years because you can't move up market and can't actually push in to the enterprise. Your product might be really mature, but your revenue lags this. And this is a really tough situation. Usually there's lots of pressure on the CEO from the board to actually increase revenue. Switching to enterprise focus exclusively can really hurt morale. A lot of companies don't want to do that. You can have a lot of high turnover. It becomes a grind. You can lose momentum. And there's a lot of companies actually that haven't made it through this that end up being acqui-hired. And I want to write more about this at some point, but I actually believe this enterprise chasm is really the cause of a lot of flat rounds and down rounds around Series B, because founders are able to build a great product, but not actually hit their monetization stride. So this is a place you really, really don't want to get stuck. And it happens to a lot of companies. What's unfortunate is that chasm is actually widening. So enterprise features are now being required by smaller businesses, small and medium businesses. And this is largely due to this kind of whole flow of unbundling workplace tools, individuals buying new apps, bringing them to work, explosion of new apps that IT needs to manage. Now even small companies are adopting dozens and dozens of apps. And things like single sign-on these typically enterprise features are showing up downstream. So if you're one of these companies building a bottom-up SaaS app, it's not unlikely that you'll go try to sell like a 50-seat deal, which is relatively small, and they'll require having SSO. They'll require like an Okta integration. And that's because these enterprise features, not really enterprise anymore, now they're everywhere. So it's essentially becoming a day one requirement for cloud SaaS to be enterprise ready. The challenge here is that you kind of have to do both. So you really have to, focus on enterprise features. If you focus exclusively on just your new product features, you lose your enterprise pipeline and you could churn those customers. So, imagine something like Box versus Dropbox. Dropbox didn't build enterprise for a long time. Box kind of took those customers from them. So, you still have to keep focusing on one side. And if you focus only on enterprise features and stop innovating, you might get lapped by a new product coming up and coming. So for example, Discord has just been this like kind of incredible rise as Slack has really stopped innovating because they've been focusing on enterprise features. Slack has stopped the consumer adoption, so Discord's taking over. So this is like a really tough place to be. You have to kind of do both at the same time. And if you're a PM leading enterprise features, it's not really clear what you do. How do you focus on enterprise? How do you focus on features that your end users like? You're really stuck. So this is why we built WorkOS. This entire story of the enterprise chasm, this gap that opens up between the people, early adopters using your product and the larger companies that really want to adopt it but can't. That's why we built WorkOS. And WorkOS helps you cross the enterprise chasm and literally unlock this enterprise market for your customers. That's what we're doing. So how do we do this? We make your app enterprise ready. So essentially what WorkOS is APIs and functionality for providing pre-built enterprise features and functionality to your app. This includes the UI as well. So we do it really for you, soup to nuts, end to end. It's really, really easy to integrate if you're a developer. Like I'm kidding, not kidding, like an hour to drop in. Really clean REST APIs, modern SDKs in a ton of different languages, and even some esoteric ones. We have an Elixir SDK coming out soon. We have webhooks that are really easy to integrate. So it's a really modern development platform. And there's seamless integration across all these different fragmented enterprise IT and HR systems. So it doesn't matter what you're plugging into, we got you covered. Product layer infrastructure. So this is not running your app, you're integrating your app with it. And some people call Stripe for enterprise features. So if you view something like Stripe or maybe Twilio, same model, but for the enterprise. The features that enterprise customers actually require, what they care about, just to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit here. First is they want to be able to authenticate users with their identity system, externally connected auth and user group management. That's usually something like Okta or Microsoft ADFS, single sign-on for authentication. And then they'll also want to connect to their directory systems. So provisioning and deprovisioning users automatically. User management and authentication is really the kind of fundamental aspect of enterprise deploying products. So this is really a lot of the stuff we focused on in WorkOS in the last year. We're going to be showing a ton of stuff about this in this talk. And also some admin UI for configuring and managing your product. So we have some of that to show as well. There's a lot more stuff that you need actually to be fully enterprise ready as you go down this road. Audit logs, authorization, role-based access control, RBAC, compliance features. What I've highlighted here are really just the first two to get started. But there's a lot. I gave a talk, I guess it's a year and a half ago now at SaaS School, Brian Kimmel's SaaS School, where it outlined a lot of this stuff. Feel free to check that out. I'll probably tweet it, link it later. Okay. So this is WorkOS. Yeah, somebody can probably drop the link to that in the chat. If you just Google Crossing the Enterprise Chasm YouTube, it'll come up for you. Today's agenda, what are we talking about today? So we've got a ton of stuff today. First, we're going to talk about the new WorkOS developer dashboard. We rolled this out in January. It's a pretty incredible rebuild of our previous dashboard. We're going to talk about new features in it, how to navigate, new functionality, and also talk about how we built it, which is pretty sweet. It's built on a really, really bleeding edge modern tech stack. So that's really exciting. First. Second, we're going to talk about updates to the admin portal. This is our UI that we provide for setting up connections. Previously, the admin portal was only available for single sign-on setting up. We're releasing directory sync in the admin portal. So you'll be able to use the admin portal to connect directories. And we'll run through a demo of that and show you how it works. Third, we have a brand new feature we're announcing today, which is APIs for doing passcode authentication. And this is for building two-factor auth into your app. This is by far the fastest way to add two-factor auth to your app, multi-factor authentication, barcode scanning for authenticator apps. That's going to be a pretty amazing demo. So that's the third thing we're talking about. Fourth, we're going to go over how to test your WorkOS integration. This is a question that we get a lot from users and developers. So best practices for as you're integrating, how to test while developing, and then also how to test through release. So test in CI/CD, your continuous integration and continuous delivery service. So we'll have a talk about that with a little bit of demos. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a fireside chat with Armando Mann, who's the Chief Business Officer at Hopin, also on the board at Hopin. Hopin's actually a WorkOS customer, funny enough. And from before Armando joined, and Armando's actually also an angel investor in WorkOS. So he's been in the WorkOS family for a while. He previously led sales and marketing and growth at companies like Dropbox, RelateIQ, Salesforce, and now Hopin. He was at Google before all that. So we're going to talk about how to move up market, like some tricks in the world of growth around SaaS. Armando's an expert at this, so definitely stick around for that. I'm super, super excited for that. So packed agenda, a lot of stuff to do today. Let's dive in. So as a first step to talk about the new WorkOS developer dashboard, I would love to hand it over to Zach, who's an engineer on our team, to run through it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zach, and I work on the WorkOS dashboard team. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the brand new dashboard experience that we've built. Last November, we ventured into the task of rebuilding the dashboard from scratch. The initial dashboard was created in 2019 and no longer suited our needs for three main reasons. First, the information architecture was confusing and no longer made sense for the feature set we now support. Second, we previously hand invited everyone to WorkOS, but we wanted to open signups so users could seamlessly integrate and onboard. Third, we wanted to update the underlying code with an architecture that would make sense for us to easily build features in the future. To do this, we broke it down and built it back up from first principles. So here's what our old dashboard looked like. And I know many of you are thinking very Stripe-like. Stripe's been a big inspiration for WorkOS thus far. So today we're excited to introduce the new WorkOS dashboard, which was built from scratch. Here you can see we've updated the styling to be more modern and fresh, and we've also added a bunch of new features. So let's dive in and talk about those. Today I'll go over the whole new experience and give some background about how we did it. I will start with some new features, two that I want to talk about. The first is a new type of resource we call organizations that aims to better organize your data within WorkOS. All of your connections will now be centered around organizations to improve how your connections are managed. Next, I'll dive into a demo showing how we restructured our webhooks to improve your integration experience. After those features, I'll talk a little bit about how we built the new dashboard and then how we launched it. I'm excited to give you a sneak peek at the modern technologies we used and how we incrementally released it. So the first significant change we made is how we structure content within the dashboard. Previously, it was focused around products, so SSO, directory sync, etc. We found users found it hard to get a bird's eye view of one of their customers. From this feedback, we changed the dashboard to focus around organizations. An organization is an entity that maps to one of your enterprise customers. It has its own name, domain, and connections. We've done this so you can get a whole picture of one of your customers, all of their connections and data in a single place. And on the next slide, you can see a little bit of a sneak peek around what the organizations look. So on the left, you can see a high level of all your organizations in a single table that's searchable. And on the right, you can see a more detailed view that sees with all the connections for a single organization. There's a lot more to come around organizations, including improved API support and domain management support. Next, let's talk a little bit about webhooks. In the old dashboard, webhooks were split into their own respective products, similar to connections. Directory sync webhooks were under directory sync, and admin portal webhooks were under admin portal. In the new dashboard, we've pulled them together into a single location. We've also added the ability to filter the exact events you want to receive, and we've enhanced the webhook test support so you can now see inline errors to debug your webhooks. This is an exciting improvement to make them more customizable to fit your workflow. So now I want to dive into a little demo to give you a feeling of how this will actually work in practice. So let me share my screen. Awesome. So as you can see here, this is the webhooks top level page. Here is a table with all of your webhooks where you can see the URL, the status, as well as all of the events for that webhook. If we dive into one of these, we can see you get more details about the webhook, including the secret that you'll need to verify the webhook, as well as all the event types that are currently turned on for this webhook. If at any point you want to change any of the details, you can easily update what events you want to receive, as well as update the URL you want to receive them at. A new feature we've added that's very cool is the ability to test them in line and see if they're working. So I have a little service set up here. That's a very simple node service. It's an Express app that has two endpoints, one that will return a 200 and one that will return a 404. And the idea here is we can see what happens when a webhook succeeds and what happens when a webhook fails. So I'm going to start this service. I have ngrok running, so this will automatically be ported into port 3008. If I start or test this webhook to the one that should return a successful 200, I can click test webhook. I can come in here and choose the event I want to choose or send, and I can simply send it. You can see it was successfully delivered at 121 because I'm an EST, and it was the event created. So you can click in here and get a little bit more details about that event that's successfully delivered. Now, if an event were to fail, we can also get a feeling of how that would work. So now I'm going to send a test webhook to the 404 endpoint. And when I send this one, we'll get an inline error that is directly associated to what that JSON response was on that 404. This helps you debug your webhooks when you're testing in order to just make it a more seamless experience. Awesome. Now let's hop back into the slides and I can dive into how we actually built this. So in terms of features, we just went over the new support for organizations that not only improves how your connections are shown in the dashboard, but also adds a way of improving how your data is structured within WorkOS. We also talked about the new WorkOS webhooks, how they are new and improved with event filtering and improved test support. Let's dive into how we actually built this. So we built this new dashboard with a modern stack that will scale seamlessly. We are using Next.js, GraphQL, and Tailwind. Next.js enables us to create a slick and modern experience with minimal configuration while optimizing for performance. We utilize the built-in automatic static optimization feature, which pre-builds every page and caches them for optimal load speed. We also utilize Tailwind, which enables us to move super quick and builds components that look great in a fraction of the time it would take with styled components or CSS and JS. We deploy it all on Vercel to take advantage of their CDN, meaning that all of our pages are cached and really quick to load no matter where you are. And finally, we utilize GraphQL for connecting to the API. We discovered this really cool new library called GraphQL CodeGen, which builds an SDK off our GraphQL schema. This means we have a fully typed SDK in the dashboard that is updated anytime the schema changes. This allows us to move fast while having everything type safe. It also has built-in hook support. So as you can see in this really simple snippet, we can simply call a method or a hook like use organizations, and it will return all of the data needed fully typed, which is an amazing experience. Next, I want to talk a little bit about how we actually released it. We needed the dashboard to get rolled out incrementally so we could have users both test it and provide feedback. In December, we rolled out an initial beta version on a different subdomain, so we had both dashboards running live simultaneously. We then stored the user's selected dashboard in our database and assigned everyone to the old dashboard by default. We added a banner to the old dashboard that allowed users to upgrade to the new dashboard. And we hid this banner behind a feature flag using Launch Darkly. And we showed it to users we wanted to test the new experience. Over the course of 2 weeks, we slowly added more users, and we asked each of them for feedback and made incremental changes over the beta before releasing it to everyone. On launch day in early January, we moved the new dashboard to dashboard.workos.com and officially deprecated the old dashboard. Using Vercel, we were able to have a no downtime switchover by simply updating the domain configuration, which was an amazing experience. Here's a little slide that shows off some of the feedback we received during our beta, which is obviously amazing to hear that our developers are loving the new experience. And there you have it. That's the new WorkOS dashboard. I've shown you some new features like organizations and our improved webhook experience. I also walked through how we built it with a modern stack of Tailwind, Next.js, and GraphQL. And finally, I talked about how we released it with feature flags and incremental releases to get continuous feedback. We have plenty more exciting features to come. So thanks for joining me. And as always, if you have any feedback, let us know. Next, I'll hand it back to Michael to talk about the admin portal.
Awesome. Thanks for running through that, Zach. We are super excited about the new dashboard rolling out. It's a better experience for users, and it's also a better experience for us developing. So it's allowing us to move faster and faster, and a lot more stuff to come in 2021, leveraging the new dashboard. So next, I want to talk about directory sync in the admin portal. So directory sync is a product that we've actually had for a while, the underlying APIs, the things that connect to directory systems. We're bringing it to admin portal. But before diving in, I wanted to give a quick overview of like, what is directory sync? Like, why would you use this? So directory sync, what it gives you is users and groups. It lets you connect to directory systems of your customers, of your enterprise customers. Specifically, what you use this to do is automatically provision and deprovision users. So somebody connects a directory, when people are added or removed, your app can dynamically update based on that. This means that you can provision accounts for all the users on day one. So say you land a big customer with 1,000 people, all 1,000 people get accounts on day one. Alternatively, what you usually do is just-in-time provisioning. So you create the accounts when people sign in, but not all at once. Salespeople typically like this feature because you can start billing for everyone on day one. So that's one thing you can do with directory sync. Another thing that you can do with this is create shadow accounts for like app mentioning people. So an app like Figma, for example, a collaborative tool, if somebody's never signed into the app before, you can actually app mention them if you have a record of the user, and that will increase engagement. It'll increase the growth of the product adoption across the organization. So that's pretty exciting. And then the third thing here is you can actually deactivate user sessions immediately when somebody is removed from the organization. And this might not sound like a big idea, but a big deal, but this is really what IT cares about. Whenever they say directory sync or SCIM is a common protocol now, common-ish, I should say, this is what they want. They want the ability to remove somebody from their directory, whether that's an HR system or Okta or whatever, and immediately deactivate access from the app. Alternatively, if you're just doing SSO, the user won't be able to sign in again, but they might have an active session on their laptop at home or on another machine. With directory sync, you get a webhook, you can turn it off immediately. It's very powerful. Also, what you can do with directory sync is sync in the groups. You get access to groups. And this is often used for enhanced roles and permissions in larger organizations. So imagine a really large company and they have an Active Directory instance with a ton of groups in it. In your app, you can actually pull those groups in and say, hey, I only want to give admin access to a group that's defined inside of Active Directory. I only want to give billing access to the finance group inside of Active Directory. Maybe it's like an engineering tool that you only want the engineering group to get access to, or a sales tool like a CRM that only the sales team gets access to. You can do that with group sync, and this is through directory sync as well. IT admins care about this because they want to have centralized management at the end of the day. That's what they care about. They're adopting hundreds of SaaS tools, literally hundreds of products, and they need to have this centralized for compliance. You may have seen this before if you've used products like the following. So 1Password actually has directory sync built in. You can automatically provision users inside of 1Password, and it's a password management tool. So the deprovisioning is obviously really important. If somebody leaves the company or is let go, you want to be able to revoke access immediately. So this is built into 1Password. Another example is Dropbox. So Dropbox has this with Azure Active Directory. You can see here, you can sync in people in groups and connect those groups to teams. The problem here, though, is that connecting directories is complex. So just like SSO, there's fragmented implementations of SCIM. That's that protocol I mentioned. There's a couple different versions of it. Things like Google Directory or Google Sync or Active Directory have totally custom protocols as well. So this is like custom APIs, not standardized. Different directories have different ways of doing updates. So you have to deal with a mixture of polling and push for real-time access. Remember, I mentioned the deprovisioning. If you want that to be real-time, you have to figure out how to do that. And what's funny is there's no actual standard for what a user profile is. There's no open protocol for like how to say first name or last name in a profile object. Is it camel case? Is it underscore case? Who knows? And even there's some legacy systems where the way that you connect to them is actually through a CSV file, so comma separated values file, which is uploaded through SFTP. So I'm talking like tech from the 90s. And in addition to being just really complex to build and taking time, this actually results in a really poor customer experience because your integration ends up breaking or not end up being to be compatible with all the different systems out there. So setting this up is actually a big challenge as well, the actual UI, configuring this. And our solution is that we actually provide the UI to set this up. So it's really fast and simple for developers to integrate admin portal with your app. It's fast to integrate on your side. It's also really fast for the enterprise IT admin to set stuff up because we include inline documentation. And so this is what we'll show in a few minutes around like generic skim. The actual docs are included in this. So it handles all the edge cases. We fix error states. We test this all the time. And our goal here is to create what we call fail-proof ergonomics. So an IT admin should be able to log into the admin portal. They open it up, and even if they've never connected to directory before, we walk them through it. It's kind of like TurboTax or something like that, but for working with IT systems. So we've done this with SSO. Now we're doing it with directory systems. And to give this demo, I will hand it over to Wilman and Logan.
Hi there, I'm Logan and I'm a developer success engineer at WorkOS. Today, I'm excited to talk to you a bit about the WorkOS admin portal and some of the new functionality we've been adding to it since we launched it last year. With the admin portal, we are building a way for enterprise customers to quickly and easily get set up connecting to your application. To do so, we've cut out the arduous back and forth emailing and debugging you've historically had to do with the IT admins of your customers. Instead, we provide them with the documentation they need to get set up themselves. Additionally, we're constantly adding in new providers and documentation, allowing you to set up the admin portal once and continue to get improvements without any further investment from you. Let's check it out. Here, we have a dummy example application Memex, a simple note-taking app using WorkOS for single sign-on and directory sync. We're looking at it from the perspective of an IT admin who hasn't used the admin portal to configure SSO yet. To configure signing into Memex with single sign-on, as a user of Memex, all we need to do is click this Configure SSO button and we're inside the admin portal. We're presented with a list of identity providers, each one with detailed documentation telling us exactly how to enable our users to sign into Memex along with the data that we'll need to do so. At the end, we've successfully configured our SSO. Back in the Memex application, we're now able to sign in with our newly connected account. It's that easy. Adding the admin portal to your codebase is just as easy. Behind the scenes, all our developers need to do is use our SDK to request a link to the admin portal from our API. When you get the link to our admin portal, just redirect your users to the short-lived link and they're off to the races. As our developers have been using admin portal for SSO, we've heard one question loud and clear. Is there an admin portal for directory sync? Today, we're ready to give you the first look at the WorkOS admin portal for directory sync. Let's take a look back at how we redirected users for the single sign-on admin portal. In particular, I'd like for you to pay special attention to this intent parameter. This parameter tells WorkOS which type of admin portal to generate a link for. Since the inception of the admin portal, single sign-on has been just the beginning of our plans for it, and we designed our API around that. If you've already integrated the admin portal for single sign-on, all you need to do is change SSO to desync and redirect your users to the link. There's nothing else to it, and there are no breaking changes to your existing code. We've plugged the admin portal for directory sync into Memex, and now our users are able to click this button to be redirected over to the admin portal. Much like the admin portal for single sign-on, IT admins are presented with a grid of providers they can select. For each of these providers, we provide an easy path to getting them set up. For some of these, such as Google Workspace, it's a simple grant flow. and your users can easily be synced over without any further configuration. No extra steps involved. Others, such as Okta, provide more detailed documentation that's easy to follow along. If you don't see your exact directory source here, we offer some instructions to set up generic SCIM directory connections. This unlocks a wide range of providers, and we're always adding more of them here as our developers and their users ask for them. Since we've already set up SSO with Okta, let's continue on to set up directory sync with Okta. Inside, we again have detailed screenshots to guide us through the process of setting up an Okta application and configuring it properly to send users and groups through WorkOS and provide access to them in Memex. Step 1 here shows us how to create a new application in Okta. Over in the Okta application dashboard, we'll find the proper integration and create a SCIM 2.0 app with OAuth bearer token. We'll then click Add to start the process. Let's give our Okta application a descriptive name so that it's easy to find and manage later. We're free to name it however we want. Let's use this name and click Next. We don't need to configure anything on this page, so we'll just click Done to complete the initial creation of the app. Up next, we need to configure our API integration. To do so, we'll move over to the Provisioning tab and click on the Configure API Integration button. Here we will click Enable API Integration. This will reveal a couple of fields for us to provide some values to. These are the endpoints that Okta will use to communicate users and groups with WorkOS and your application, and the OAuth bearer token that will authorize that communication. In the admin portal, we're provided easy-to-copy values for both of these. Things are looking good here, so let's click Save and continue on to the next step of the admin portal. Now we need to tell Okta which actions we want to enable. We'll want Okta to send information when users are assigned to this integration, when user attributes are changed, and when users are deactivated from the directory source. Let's click Save. And we're almost done. Our directory connection is now fully set up. All that's left to do is assign some users to our app and push any groups we need. Here, the admin portal can guide us through the rest of the setup process according to our unique needs. Today, we want to give only the engineering team access to Memex, so we're going to assign the engineering group in Okta. In the future, if we need to assign a single person from finance to manage this subscription, we can come back and follow the steps to assign individual users. With that done, the last thing we need to do is push out the engineering group. The admin portal guides us through the process of doing so, and with just a few clicks, our groups have been pushed. And that's everything. We now have a fully set up directory connection with our engineering group assigned to it. We were able to set this up in less than 3 minutes with no emails back and forth. On the WorkOS side, we're already displaying the engineering team in the Memex developer dashboard, and webhooks are firing to notify the Memex application of the availability of these new groups and users. The IT admin can also see for themselves which users have been synced in properly at the next screen. All of the users have also been picked up by the Memex application. Just as with single sign-on, the admin portal for directory sync is customizable to better blend into your application. We offer the ability to remove all references to WorkOS and add in your company's logo. Additionally, you can replace the primary color used across the admin portal with your brand's custom coloring. Set up custom DNS to use your own domain for the admin portal, and make the admin portal feel right at home with your application. And that's the admin portal for directory sync. We've been hard at work on it and are preparing to roll it out to all of our developers. If you're interested in integrating the admin portal for directory sync into your application, reach out to our developer success team and let us know which directory sources you're looking to support.
All right, thanks for running through that, Logan. So that's the WorkOS admin portal. Like Logan mentioned, this now includes all the complex UI and UX flows that you would have for any directory sync connection, along with best of class documentation to walk an IT admin through it. Even though we just showed you how to set up a Okta SCIM connection in that example, you as a developer will never have to do that. That's what's done by the IT admin. All you need to do if you're using the admin portal today is literally just change that intent from SSO to directory sync to desync, and you're good to go. This is really fantastic. We're super, super excited to roll this out. Normally setting up a directory, I can't even tell you how long it takes with a lot of companies. It's hours going back and forth. The admin portal just makes it completely effortless. This is in beta today. Please just contact us and we'll get you set up for it for preview access. It's just behind a feature flag, and we'll be rolling it out to everyone across the WorkOS platform, hopefully sometime this spring. We'll see. So that's the admin portal with directory sync. All right, let's talk about passcode auth. So we are particularly excited to showcase this stuff today. This is a brand new API, new feature that we haven't shown anyone. So super, super excited to roll it out. Before diving into actually what the API is, let's kind of zoom back. I want to talk about what is two-factor auth. So what is this? Like, why is two-factor auth? Maybe you've heard about it. Why does it actually matter? Well, two-factor auth, the second factor, what it's named after, is adding a second way for users to authenticate into your app. And this doesn't actually mean they can authenticate through two different ways. It's not like log in with Facebook or log in with their Twitter. It's actually they need to be combined. So the first factor here is something you know, which is something, it's typically your password. So a user knows something in their head. That's what they use to sign in. That's typically one-factor auth. The second factor is something you have. And this is usually a phone or some kind of physical device, something. And in order to log in, you need to be able to authenticate both of these. So the users need to have something they know, they need to remember their password, and they need to have this physical thing, their phone. What this specifically prevents is attacks from knowing or guessing someone's password. So the most common way, the absolute most common way that accounts get compromised is either people are reusing passwords and they get leaked online, get compromised somewhere and somebody reused a password, or through a phishing attack. Reusing passwords, it's easy to understand why that happens. I mean, people reuse passwords all the time. A phishing attack is when somebody sends something to one of your users, and it spoofs your app. And so they're able actually to guess the password to get it because the user puts it into a login box. These are pretty sophisticated and advanced these days. There was one from a few years ago where it looked like somebody was sharing a Google Doc with you, and you clicked view documentation, view doc, and it came up with the Google login screen, and people just put in their password to view the doc, and that actually stole their password. So that's a phishing attack. And two-factor auth virtually eliminates the threat of phishing attacks. And the reason why is because it requires another form of authentication that they can't guess. It's like your phone. They would actually need to have your phone. So this is really, really important to IT admins. As you're going up market and thinking about enterprise readiness, this is usually one of the top features that's asked for, in addition to single sign-on. If you have username password auth, they'll say, hey, do you support 2FA? So you've probably seen this before. Dropbox has this. Again, if you try to log into Dropbox and you set up 2FA, asks for a 6-digit code. In this case, it's texted to somebody, to your phone number. iCloud has this also. Here's a little iCloud sign-in screen, punch in some numbers that show up on your phone when you try to sign in on the web. And GitHub has this too. GitHub, I have mine set up here, the screenshot, as an authenticator app. So I run a like Google Authenticator and then put in the code that way. So there's many different ways to deliver the code. Same idea though, it's connected to my phone. If you haven't seen this before, please go read about it and set up your accounts, because you definitely should have 2FA set up on your personal accounts. But this is all over the internet now, all over the web. It's best practices. To build two-factor auth, you need to add that second factor. And this is what WorkOS Passcode auth does. So we're providing APIs to add the second factor to your app. So you probably have an existing email password flow login system. This is a way to enrich that and add 2FA. So what we do is we provide the user a unique one-time passcode, often abbreviated OTP. And there's different ways to deliver this. It can either be sent through SMS, sent through an email message. We also support authenticator apps. So that what I mentioned, that if you've ever scanned the barcode and set that thing up. So that's another way to get a code. And then these are all verified through a single endpoint. It's very, very simple to integrate. And to run through this and talk about how the API actually works, I'd love to hand it over to Rohan.
Thanks, Michael. Hey everyone, I'm Rohan, a backend engineer here at WorkOS, and I'm really excited to walk you through how to integrate 2FA using WorkOS Passcode auth. So the entire process boils down to around 4 main steps. Let's say you're building some new features out in your application. The first thing you'll want to do is build an interface for your users to come in, create, and enroll new factors. So as Michael mentioned, these can be phones, they can be email addresses, or they can be authenticator apps. As your users come in and enroll several factors, the next time they log in, you want to come in and prompt these users to select one of these enrolled factors. So this could be like when you log into GitHub, you enter your password, then you can give your user a choice. Would they like to receive a code on their phone or their email? WorkOS maintains this idea of passcode sessions. These are short-lived records with expiration timestamps and verification codes. So once your user selects a factor, you would need to kick off a passcode session with WorkOS, and then you would receive a verification code. We'll provide you the email or phone number to send this to, so you can customize your SMS or emails however you'd like. And then once your user comes back, inputs the verification code, you send it over to WorkOS, and we'll let you know if your user is ready to go. So let's walk through this in a live demo and see how it actually works. So right here, we're looking at Memex, which is our note-taking app. And I'm currently logged in. And what I like to do is I'd like to enroll in two-factor authentication. So if we go to our settings page, we can see we have a few different options. I can come into my security tab and see that I can either enroll my SMS or authenticator app. So let's suppose I'd like to enroll my phone in an SMS-based 2FA. I can select enroll a device. I will input a phone number and then send a code for verification. And then I can bring up my phone, see that I receive a code, and then input it in. So once I confirm it, I can see that this has now been verified and my factor has been enrolled. So if I come back in, log out, and try to log back into Memex, I can see now that I have an option to get a verification code at my phone. So I can select this option, look for my phone, see I get another verification code, and enter this in. And I'm immediately redirected back into the application. We can run through this exact same flow one more time, except with the authenticator app. So it's a very similar flow where I can select enroll a device, take my phone, scan a QR code. And once it's processed and the seed is stored in my phone, I get a time-based one-time password, which rotates every few seconds. So I can enter the code here, confirm it, and this is now also verified. So if I come back, log out, and try this one more time, I can now see I have an additional option to enter the verification code from my authenticator app. So I can pull up my phone, get another code, and log back in. So I'm back into Memex. So now let's take a look at how this actually operates under the hood and what API calls are being made. Great. So the first thing we'd like to do is as your users come in, you want them to come create and enroll different factors. So WorkOS provides an endpoint which you can send a post request to with some information about your user. You can send over their email, the type of factor, in this case, this would be an SMS, and then the phone number. You can use the same exact endpoint to create a time-based one-time password. So if you'd like to use an authenticator app, you can send over pretty much the same information and update the type. And then you'll also create a new factor for your user. An example API response that you'll get from WorkOS will be some information about the record. If it's a time-based one-time password, WorkOS will generate a QR code for you to render in your application. We maintain states if the factors are pending activation or are enrolled, and some other information about the user. So after your user has come in and they've created several factors, now into your login screen, the next step is to prompt the user for a choice in what factor they'd like to use to perform an additional form of verification. So just like before, WorkOS provides another endpoint where you can list out all the factors, and we will give you a selection to render out for your user. So your user comes in, and let's suppose they would like to receive a verification code or an email. As we mentioned earlier, WorkOS maintains passcode sessions. So once your user makes a selection that they'd like to receive a code on their phone number, you can send a post request to the WorkOS API with the factor ID or some other information, and then create the session. Once you create a session, WorkOS will give you some data containing the verification code, a phone number or email where to send it to, when this code actually expires. And the really important thing about this step is creating a session is only required for out-of-band channels, such as for SMS or email. If your user is using an authenticator app, because they're time-based and rotate every few seconds based off the seed, this step is not explicitly required for that. The final step here is to actually verify the passcode session. So your user has received an email or SMS, or they have their app pulled up. The final step is to take that passcode with the session ID or factor ID, send it over to WorkOS, and then you'll receive a flag whether or not this passcode is correct. Once that's done, your user is off to the races, and they're ready to log back into your application. So we can see in just a few API calls, a few lines of code, it's pretty easy to build out a two-factor authentication flow. The WorkOS Passcode Auth API is very composable, and no matter if you're using a built-in email password service, you're using OmniAuth, you're using WorkOS for SSO, this will easily integrate into any lifecycle. We're really excited to bring this to your hands. Okay, back to you, Michael.
Thanks so much, Rohan. So we are super, super excited about Passcode Auth APIs. If you already have username and password auth in your app, this is the easiest way to add two-factor auth. We have a lot more stuff coming in this, and it's incredibly fast to integrate. I can't emphasize enough how we've built this just to easily drop in right next to your existing authentication system. If this is something you're interested in trying out, learning more about, this is in preview release status. We're working with a few early folks. Please get in touch if you want to just ping us here in the chat during this presentation, or ping us later through support or your Slack channels. We'll get you set up and get you going. But this is going to be extremely powerful. You can compose this in a ton of different ways. We're really excited to see what you all do with this. Great. So the last thing before jumping into the fireside chat with Armando that we want to talk about is how to test your application. So this is a question that we get a lot by many different users. And so to talk about how to test your integration as you're working on it, I'd love to hand it over to Blair, a developer success engineer on our team.
Thanks, Michael. In this talk, I'll discuss why you would want to test your WorkOS integration and the testing strategies you can use. First, I'll touch on automated testing through CI/CD pipelines and how standardized WorkOS API responses make it easy to mock the information WorkOS sends to your app. Next, I'll go through testing webhook endpoints and local development, which is facilitated by test webhooks you can send from the WorkOS dashboard. Finally, I'll explain the importance of end-to-end testing and the built-in Okta test authentication flow available in the WorkOS dashboard. This discussion will be followed by a demo where I will run a test with a mocked WorkOS API response. I will use test webhooks from the WorkOS dashboard in a local development environment, and I will walk through the Okta test authentication flow. Let's get started. Automated testing through CI/CD pipelines is a proven way to consistently build, package, test, and deploy code during the development lifecycle. You should test your application's integration with WorkOS in your automated test suite. The issue with testing any external API service is that CI/CD pipelines run often, and making that many calls to the WorkOS API could be costly. However, you can easily mock requests to and responses from the WorkOS API in your test suite. For example, a successful call to the get a profile WorkOS API endpoint will return a profile object with standardized attributes. You can mock this response in your test and thus not call the WorkOS API on every pipeline run. This will ensure that any changes introduced in development won't break your authentication with WorkOS. When integrating with WorkOS Directory Sync, you'll need to build endpoints to ingest webhooks. These webhooks will contain events such as user created or user deleted. When initially developing these endpoints, it's not always possible to have access to a test directory. You may only have access to an internal directory, and you don't want to modify real employee data for testing. The WorkOS dashboard has you covered with test webhooks for all supported directory sync events. You can verify webhook endpoints while developing and not have to use live user data. We also recommend using ngraph for local development, as webhooks require HTTPS. The final piece to testing is an end-to-end integration test between your application, WorkOS, and an SSO identity provider. In this test, you can be confident that your app is set up to use WorkOS to authenticate a user with any provider. The issue is similar to webhooks. It's hard to get test instances for SSO providers, and you don't want to use a live system with real user data for testing. Again, the solution is built into the WorkOS dashboard with a test Okta authentication flow. When you select the Provision Test User button, WorkOS creates a user and SAML app in our foo corp Okta test instance. You will also see a foo corp SSO connection in your WorkOS dashboard. You can use these credentials to test how your app, through WorkOS, authenticates a user with Okta. Because WorkOS standardizes its API responses for all providers, you don't need to do this end-to-end integration test for each provider. WorkOS tests all providers for you. As long as your app can ingest the standard WorkOS API responses, you are ready to support any SSO provider that WorkOS does. Now I'll show a demo of the 3 testing features I just discussed. In this demo, I have an example Ruby on Rails app that is using RSpec for testing. I use a method in my user model to find or create a user based on information in the profile object returned from WorkOS. In my test, I mock the WorkOS profile object for an example Okta user to check that a new user is either created if it's the first login or matched to a current user if it's a subsequent login. I run the RSpec tests and see that they check out. So I'm confident that this method in my app can ingest the profile object sent from WorkOS. Moving on to webhooks. I have a route configured to ingest both the user created and user deleted event webhooks. I also have logic to validate the timestamp and signature of the webhooks before parsing their bodies. I'm developing locally and have ngrok running so I can send test webhooks from the WorkOS dashboard. I navigate to my webhook endpoint in my WorkOS dashboard and see that I can send a test webhook from the dashboard. When I send this test webhook, I should see changes in my user list on my example Rails app. I send a test user created webhook, see that it was delivered successfully, and see that a user has been added to my app. I can do the same thing for the user deleted webhook. I see that it was delivered successfully. And in my app, a user has been deleted. It looks like my webhook endpoint is configured correctly and ready to accept user created and user deleted events. Finally, I'd like to test the end-to-end integration between my app, WorkOS, and an SSO provider. In my WorkOS dashboard, I navigate to the test credentials page to use the Okta test application. I've already provisioned my test user, so I save the credentials, select a redirect URI to test, and then select the Login with FooCorp account link. This sends me to Okta, where I can enter my credentials. After authenticating successfully, I'll be sent back to my app where I'm logged in as the user. Now I'm confident that my app's integration with WorkOS is configured correctly, and my app is ready to authenticate users with all providers that WorkOS supports. Now let's summarize what we talked about today. Today, we highlighted 3 testing strategies for your WorkOS integration: mocking WorkOS API responses in your automated test suite, sending test webhooks from the dashboard, and using the test Okta authentication flow for an end-to-end test with your application. Thanks for listening and happy testing. I'll send you back to Michael.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Blair. So testing is obviously something that's really, really important for your app. We're hoping with these strategies, you can build a robust way to test your app against WorkOS and also test that full end-to-end authentication flow. If you haven't seen those test credentials for the FooCorp, which is an Okta example, please go try it out. Log into the WorkOS dashboard. It's really, really useful for demoing your app. If you've ever wanted to demo to your boss what it looks like for Okta customers, we got you covered. I can just tell you, trying to get an Okta test instance is kind of a pain. You have to talk to their sales team and they won't stop calling you afterwards. So we got you covered for that. Don't worry. You can just use that account to demo and test. We got a lot more stuff coming for testing down the line, but this is a great place to get started. Okay, so this is a lot of our content for the day. So we ran through, just to summarize really quick, a tour of the new WorkOS developer dashboard. Please log in, test that out. If you haven't seen it, let us know if you have any feedback. We'd love to improve it for you. Second, we talked about the new admin portal with directory sync. So the same ease of setting up SSO and setting up SAML connections for enterprise IT admins now being brought to the world of directory sync for setting up Skim, Workday, Gusto, Bamboo HR, you name it. We got it covered. That's rolling out. Also, we talked about APIs for passcode authentication, and this is for building two-factor auth in your app. I saw some good conversation about this in the chat. This is the fastest way to add powerful multi-factor authentication to your application. And I just want to be clear again, this is a separate API, and so it doesn't require using WorkOS SSO. It doesn't require using directory sync. All of these pieces are actually independent components that you can compose together in your app. They all play nicely together, but you don't have to use all of them at once. So if you're just looking for two-factor auth, you can just use our APIs to build two-factor auth. That's it. So really, really powerful. Super excited to roll that out. And lastly, we just talked about testing the WorkOS integration in CI/CD. Really, really great presentation by Blair there. Next, would love to transition over and have a quick fireside chat with Armando from Hopin. I haven't been paying attention to the chat. I hope Armando's here. Fingers crossed. Let's try to bring him up. Just a sec. I was thinking for a quick off, would love for you to give a quick introduction about yourself in your own words, your background. We met 10 years ago, which makes me feel incredibly old at this point, when I was an intern at Dropbox. Maybe talk about that earlier and what you've been up to since really quick.
Yeah, you are old. I'm close to time. So my quick story is, I was an engineer before I turned to the dark side. I started my first company when I was in college. I won't say how long ago that was. But I'm from Argentina. That's where that company started. We grew to about 150 people, eventually sold that business after 7 years. And that was my first 7 years calendar, 25-year type of roller coaster building a business. That brought me to the US. Long story short, Argentina is not a very stable country. So to get hard currency into your business, you have to go into other markets. So brought me to the US, and I discovered Silicon Valley. And I was like, okay, I want to learn what that looks like. So I went to Google. And I was lucky enough to join a team called Emerging Businesses, where we were launching new businesses within Google. That later became Google X, and then that morphed into Alphabet. So it was working on things that were not core Google. And that was incredibly fun. We would always joke that we were the best funded startup in Silicon Valley because we had the Google balance sheet to go and build things, and plenty of stories there of how crazy it is to build a startup within Google. After a few years of doing that, I was lucky enough to meet Drew at Dropbox. And he came and said, hey, come and incubate a new business within Dropbox. I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, look, we have the consumer business. We need to build an enterprise business. And our customers want to use this at work. Can you go and build something similar to what you did at Google with emerging businesses, which was incubating things within Google? Here's incubate something within Dropbox. And that's where you and I met. So as you know, I led the charge in getting Dropbox for Business off and going. And that was a phenomenal ride, super, super fun. And as part of the experience, one of the folks on my team asked me to mentor one of their classmates who was starting another company called RelateIQ. And that's how we met the RelateIQ team. And as I was spending time with that team, I realized that more often than not, I wanted to be on the other side of the table working on the problem that they were trying to solve. So for folks that haven't heard of RelateIQ, it was a CRM. It was the first CRM that actually brought AI into the process. And that sounds fancy, but the key thing is CRMs for salespeople is just a form where you type a bunch of stuff, and then your manager can run a report on whatever you typed in, right? It's a form on database and reporting. What RelateIQ had was, instead of typing things in there, why don't you suck all the data out of your email, your calendar, your calls to figure out what's going on without you having to type everything. So automatically capturing all that data and then applying some smarts into that data to show you as a rep what was going on and what you should do next. So basically flipping, instead of being a form with a database for other people to look at the data that you already knew because you had it in your notes, it was a system that gave you data that you didn't have, surfaced that in a smart way. So it was incredible for a business guy to go and see what was possible. It was incredibly compelling, so I ended up jumping into RelateIQ. We went from first dollar to $1 million very, very quickly. And the evil empire acquired us. So we ended up joining Salesforce. And I thought I was going to stay there for a couple of months, make sure everybody was settled and then leave. But I actually loved it. Loved the company, loved the culture, loved the people I met, and time just flew by. Ended up being there almost 4 years after the acquisition. And I still, a little bit, part of my heart is still at Salesforce. I still have incredible respect for that team. But I left and decided to take some time off. My wife and I were having our 4th kid. So I said, well, let's see if I can spend more time with this baby, and spend 3 years investing and advising in companies such as WorkOS. And earlier this year, in trying to invest in different companies, I met with Johnny Bufferat, who's the CEO of Hopin. And the conversation switched from investing my money to investing my time. And yeah, long story short, now I'm Chief Business Officer and board member at Hopin, which is a virtual events company that I hope you all start using.
Yeah, I hope we should use it for the next one. Sorry we didn't get it lined up for this one. I know we chatted about it, but next time.
I agree.
And Hopin, since the last year you've been working has just gone through the roof. I mean, I think last January, a year ago, you guys were like 10, 15 employees. Now it's 200, 300. It's just
400.
Unreal. So I want to zoom back to the Dropbox era. So this is you were one of the first people to do this, to take what was a thriving, bottom-up, consumer-driven business that had that viral adoption and start thinking about the enterprise. Can you bring us back to the era, put us in your shoes? How did you think about approaching that? What did you do then? And sort of what do you see today as people, trying to make that transition?
Yeah, it's interesting. So at the time, we had all sorts of companies using our products for work. And we had all these beautiful domains that were in our install base, our paid install base. But the basic thing that customers were asking for was, hey, can we buy in bulk? Can we get a little bit more services? But what they were saying, the features and the things they were asking for fell into two categories. One was visibility, and the other one was control. So they want to first know what's going on in this app that now all my employees are using. So who has access? What files are we putting in there? Are people using it or not? Like, what's this doing for us? And the second in control was, if somebody leaves, I want to be able to get them out of Dropbox and keep the files that are owned by the company. I want to be able to control who gets access to folders. So basically, it was visibility and control, the two main drivers of the product, on top of the core user experience that Dropbox had. That has changed a little bit when I see a bunch of these apps going from solo user to multiplayer, if you will. So you have those two things that the enterprise wants, but there are two other things that people are asking for. One is collaboration, which Dropbox natively had, right? Because even if you had your own account, you were collaborating with others in shared folders. But the other one that is surfacing more and more is security. Well, tell me about certifications. How are you? What's your privacy policy? All of those things that 10 years ago, when you and I were building that business, were not as understood. Like, what does cloud security mean? Now it's something that people ask a lot. So visibility control still key drivers, collaboration if your product doesn't have collaboration, and then security.
Yeah, I've noticed it's there's been kind of two shifts. Like, the world of cloud software and tools that people are using is evolving and becoming more sophisticated, but there's also just so many more people using them and so many more types of businesses and different industries. And so those requirements around security may be not needed in Dropbox circa 2012, 2011. Right. But now for the people using Dropbox are, super, super important.
Right. We didn't know, our customers didn't know yet what exactly that meant. Now it's way better understood what security means.
So Drew kind of tapped you and said, hey, come do this inside of Dropbox. Need some fresh talent from the outside to do this. I'm curious if you could talk about how, it's a good way to say this. I think a lot of founders today are in that same position as Drew, realizing, hey, we have this like thriving bottom-up business, but the mountain I actually need to climb is the one next to us. How did you think about navigating that in terms of Dropbox's priorities and helping advocate for that business? Or, I remember when I was there, enterprise was like a dirty word. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody even thought about this stuff.
Michael, you're going after the hard ball, the get-go. No warm-ups.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's the hardest. That's by far the hardest thing, right?
Yeah.
You have this culture of like beautiful products, making products people love, bottoms-up adoption, virality, building products for grandma. You remember, like Araj would always say, features need to be grandma-proof. Like, if my grandma gonna use it, we're not gonna launch it, right? But enterprises have different needs. They need bells and whistles. There's some things they truly need to run their business that are the grandma won't like, right? So it's a constant tension. We call it the two-headed monster, right? We had thriving consumer business and this thriving enterprise business, and there's always a trade-off. Even when you launch a feature, where do you put that feature into, the free product or the paid product, right? And it wasn't obvious. So look, I think one of the main things that helped me navigate that personally was that my background is in engineering. So I could empathize with what a very engineering-driven organization was going through when trying to embrace the business that comes from enterprises without wanting to be anywhere closer to an Oracle or an SAP. Right? Thinking of those as more canonical B2B enterprise software companies. So it was first and foremost understanding what the other teams are going through and building very strong relationships. Nothing beats that. There's no strategy deck that beats the understanding what's going on with each person, what are the priorities, and how to problem solve together, right, in a productive way. So not very high level strategic McKinsey type content. Truly is about the people.
Just kind of a grind and building those relationships, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, Dropbox, successfully made that turn too, and has built just a tremendous business side of the business for the enterprise customers.
Yeah.
I wanted to also ask about kind of more how you think about sales for this. So, going after that list of users, those domains, and building a sales team around that is very different than building kind of just the SDR army that's out, pounding the pavement.
Absolutely.
If you were to think like, hey, kind of the modern SaaS company that has this bottoms up adoption, how should they think about building their initial sales team?
Yeah. So with Dropbox in particular, I would tell the sales team, don't engage unless they use Dropbox already. Because at the time, as a consumer business, we had so many users that were using Dropbox already that there was no point in going to somebody that had never used it, was using the F drive in their intranet or something like that, and say, hey, you know what? Cloud is great. You should put your files on the cloud. I'm like, what are you talking about? Do you have all these features? No, we don't. The conversation is very different if you say, hey, you love this product. You're using it all the time. Here's a version of it that works for work, right? That you can use safely in your environment and is now blessed by IT. It's a very different conversation. So first is who you talk to and how you're going to engage with them drives how you build a sales team. So because we're going after existing users, we will run campaigns on that install base to get leads that would come to us, or we would create prompts in the products or in email flows where it would tell you like, hey, looks like you're sharing folders with a bunch of people with the same domain. If you're using this for work, we have a product for you. Talk to us, right? And that's how the flow works. And that's what we had. Then we had a highly automated self-serve process. And throughout that self-serve process, because you knew what the product was, we didn't have to explain it to you. You knew what features we were offering you for the business product. Then you could click and then say, yes, I want to try it and buy it. And then we would have what we called a very slippery funnel with escape hatches along the way. So if you were looking at the Dropbox for business and you're like, hey, I don't know if this totally works for me, I have a few questions, you could always talk to us. And we will always either chat or call or whatever, and then send you back into the funnel, train you again to go and buy online from us. Because that's how we would get incredible speed and adoption, which is very different from in other scenarios where you have to go and have that sales conversation to explain the value prop, explain why things are different, try to get them to put some data in, etc. So it was very different from a traditional like Salesforce-like process.
It seems like that velocity sales can really just be like a tailwind for businesses like this, that almost sales teams that are doing more of these like manual setup calls, everything has to be a conversation. It's hard to compete.
Yes and no. So it's different. I don't think it's better. And the reason I say that is, again, if you know who you're selling to or what you're selling, then you have to build the sales motion for that. You cannot sell Workday in a self-serve high velocity model. It doesn't land and expand. Either you land or you don't land Workday for your whole organization, right? So and the price point matters a lot. If you are if you're in the $1,000 to $2,000 of annual contract for a product, you can do that online. People will swipe the credit card. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll figure it out. But if you're getting to the $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, a lot of people will do swipe credit card online, but a lot of people want to talk to you, right? And understand, okay, am I doing the right thing? Do you have the things I want? When you say encryption or something, what exactly does that mean? When you say this one bullet about the product, what does that actually mean? What does the roadmap look like? Just give me confidence, because I'm not going to spend $10,000, $50,000 of my company's money. I'm not going to get approval. Now my reputation is on the line. It's not something that I can just pay for, use myself, and if it doesn't work, it's fine.
They want to have a little bit more conviction, have that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's not one versus the other. I think it depends on the product you're selling and who you're selling it to. Some functions buy online more than others.
I got advice at one point. Someone told me, hey, there's a set of customers out there that just will never buy your stuff unless they can talk to somebody. Doesn't matter how good the onboarding is, doesn't matter how good your self-serve funnel is. They just want to pick up a phone and call, and then they'll immediately buy. It won't be a hard sell, but they just got to talk to someone.
Yeah. And look, a lot of sales is building trust, right? And you can build trust because you have the biggest brand and people you're the default, right? And it's like, well, I'm not going to be in trouble by buying Salesforce today, right? It used to be nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Now it's probably the same for Salesforce. But if you're not Salesforce, you're not IBM, you need to build trust. And you can build trust with all sorts of online artifacts, quotes, and case studies, all of that. But many times you just need to know that there's somebody behind the website, right? It's not just a beautiful website, but there's a human there. Make sense?
Yeah, I think that adage probably is true today for Salesforce, that people don't get fired for buying Salesforce. So I had one last question before we wrap up for you. So you spent a few years advising startups, have given me a lot of great advice over the years. If you were to distill some of this for specifically people building SaaS, B2B SaaS, maybe the new founder building workplace tools, thinking about sales, marketing, go-to-market to build this business, what advice would you give them? What do you think are things that you see founders, kind of get wrong more often than not, that maybe having that earlier on could accelerate them? What would you say?
Yeah, if you're building a SaaS product for businesses, don't assume, ask. I see a lot of founders that have this vision of what the world would look like if they built these products, and they would buy it if they were in their buyer's shoes. But just spend a lot of time building without talking to enough customers. And you want to show them the raw version, show them the unpolished versions of what you're building, and then listen to what they're saying. Don't build what they're asking you to build, but listen to what they're saying. If they're saying, hey, I would love to see X feature, understand why they want that feature, and maybe you'll solve it in a different way. But I think that's what's still true north is talk to customers. If you want to sell to customers, if you're building a consumer app, all bets are off. Who the hell knows it's going to work? But on the B2B side, if your product is not resonating, once you build it, probably won't resonate. Once you iterate it, it still won't resonate. Right? People need to understand what you're trying to do.
There's a reason you have 2 years, 2 ears and one mouth. Yeah. Armando, thanks so much for joining us. This is really great. How can people hear more about Hopin too? We didn't talk about Hopin at all. Do you want to plug it really fast before we wrap up?
Yeah. So Hopin is your place to run virtual events when you want to make it more like this is a webinar where the two of us are talking and we're streaming it out. We could do this here. We could do this in StreamYard, which is a company we recently acquired, and stream this into Facebook or Instagram. But if you want to bring that same conversation, have more interactivity, so have people have a conversation about it, or then have smaller breakout rooms, or have one-on-one sessions, or bring sponsors or monetize an event like this, and that's where Hopin shines. So we run events for thousands of companies at this point. We run thousands of events a week. So hopefully join one of the events, go to hopin.com/explore, pick an event, check it out, see how that feels, and it's a great way to engage with your users. So hopefully you give it a shot.
And you got my word that we were going to try to get WorkOS on this and do it for the next event. I promise you that. We'll do it.
Thank you.
Cool. Armando, thanks so much for joining. Thanks to everyone who attended, all of our potential customers or users at learning more about WorkOS. And then also special shout out to our whole team for helping put on this event. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes and people that help prep stuff. So thanks so much. We'll see you next quarter and hope you guys have a great week. Take care.